Welcome to the In the Black of My Mind podcast. I am your host, KC, and this podcast is centered around having conversations that need to be destigmatized within the Black community. And today we're going to be talking about the understanding and navigation of depression. And I feel like it's important that we have this conversation because it's not something that's exclusive to any one person. Anybody can experience depression. Some people are more predisposed to have it at a more acute level, but it's something that's very possible for any person to experience. And I feel like a part of why it's so difficult to talk about is because there's some stigma attached to its actual existence and what it is and why it is. And I want to have a conversation to make it more comfortable for us to even be able to talk about it with the people that we love or any resources. But before we get too deep into it, I want to make sure that you understand one of the resources that is always and forever will be available to you. If you feel like you don't have anyone to talk to and you feel like you can't manage the feelings that you were having, reach out to the 988 suicide hotline. It's not just for suicidal ideation. It's for whenever you need someone to speak to. There will be someone who is available in your area to be able to have a conversation with you. And if you need more resources and more help, they will direct you and reach out to the powers that need to be reached out to make sure that you get the help that you need. But let's go right into it, right? I think it's important that we understand what depression is. And depression, for a lot of people, is a clinical diagnosis, right? It's something that happens that distinguishes like transient sadness or grief. And there are different ways that depression can take place. There are people that experience depression in a seasonal aspect and only that, or people that experience depression after having a child, postpartum depression, or people that have persistent depressive disorder, or people that have biological brain chemistry that sets them up to have depressive episodes chronically or cyclically, right? And I think that that's a part of what is being missed in a lot of these conversations centered around depression is people thinking that depression is a choice. People thinking that depression is something that can be wheeled out of. It's something that can, you pop a pill and it's gone. A lot of the case is that's not the case. A lot of people don't have control over whether or not they are depressed, and they don't have control over whether or not they express the fact that they are depressed, because that expression shows up differently for everybody. For me, depression shows up as isolation, shows up as lack of eating, lack of energy, lack of social interaction, lack of sleeping, and quite frankly, lack of self-importance. When I'm depressed, you do not see me. You won't see me, you won't hear from me, you won't talk to me. I will just be probably stuck in my room and I won't leave unless I have to go walk the dog, take care of someone else. But if it's involving taking care of myself, my depression shows up as complete and utter isolation and sometimes moves even further into self-deprecation so that it can validate the way that I feel. And I think that depression is a focus on the past. A lot of the things that may have happened to you, traumatic events, traumatic experiences, decisions that you made that could have been better. And then you start to find a way to beat yourself up in that regard. And that's kind of where depression finds its power, is you being in a space where you're not surrounded by anyone else or any experiences that can make you feel otherwise, because it goes against the narrative that you've created for the person that you are in that moment of depression. And I feel like we have to understand that there is a chemical imbalance aspect in depression versus what the modern understanding of depression is. And the modern understanding of depression is centered around it being a choice, or it being something that is just centered around a negative emotion. I'm sad today. And depression usually lasts for way longer than just a 24-hour period. Sometimes it can last months, years. Some people experience it cyclically, where they will go through a period of time where everything feels like shit, and it takes a minute for them to get back to their baseline. And then sometimes they'll go really high up and then they'll go right back, and it just continue to go over and over again. That's some people's actual experience. And for me, the daily impact of my depression, my actual lived experience, I've definitely gotten to a point within depression where I have tried to find ways to make me feel in line with what it was that my brain was creating, whatever scenario it may have been, right? Where if I had a job and I felt really good about the job, well, once depression hits, I don't feel like I'm qualified, right? I don't feel like I'm worthy of whatever that job is. Or sometimes when in the past, when depression would hit, I don't feel like I'm worthy of this relationship. So I have to do something to ruin it. I have to do something to make the reality of what it is that I'm experiencing fit what my perceived reality actually is. And that is basically fodder to the fire that is depression. It feeds it because it starts to kind of validate your negative perception of yourself. And then it makes it worse than what it actually would have been if you just would have done nothing. And I think that we have to, especially within the Black community, we have to be more open about having these conversations, having conversations centered around every emotion, but specifically depression, because a lot of it is, and I'll talk for myself, I didn't know what depression was until I was like 19, 20. I didn't know like on an actual large scale. I didn't know that it was more than just I feel depressed, right? I thought that it was just a feeling, right? It was just an emotion. I didn't understand the clinical aspect to it. I didn't understand the chemical aspect to it. I didn't understand the cyclical nature of what depression was. And I definitely didn't understand that it can be something that is passed down, right, through the genome. I didn't understand any of that. I didn't understand depression outside of the Great Depression, right? And within the economical description, because, you know, the Great Depression was a really big thing. But, you know, I'm 29 and I feel like I'm still kind of in the infancy of understanding what depression is. And I want to kind of have a little bit more of a conversation centered around, like, you know, whenever you're in a space where you wake up in the morning, your expectations are what build the nature of your mentality, right? When you wake up in the morning, you go out into the day, what robs you of your mental stability is life not meeting your expectation. So people within the Black community don't necessarily have a leg up in that aspect, because a lot of the time within our history, within the things that we've experienced, we wake up with the expectation of being oppressed. We wake up with the expectation of being overlooked. We wake up with the expectation of being abused. We wake up with the expectation of being forgotten, minimized, right? So we don't have the expectation of positivity off the rip. So sometimes the depression is something that is innate. It's something that exists before we have the experience outside of it. And then, right, then when we get to walk through life a little bit and we actually experience some happiness, and then that's ripped away from us, that negative emotion is injected almost immediately into the experience because it validates what we already know. We already know that bad things are going to happen because they've been doing that. They've been happening the whole time. So whenever it's the other way around and then it goes back to what we know, it's like, okay, this is the way I'm supposed to feel. So that's kind of like how, you know, our parents and our grandparents got to a point where they don't necessarily want to really validate the depressive episodes. It's like, well, this is something that everybody's experiencing. This isn't new. This isn't new. This isn't new to you. This is just something that you've experienced for the first time, right? This is not new to us. We've experienced this for generations. Grandma, grandpa, great-grandma, great-grandpa. Why are you complaining, right? But the reality is, just because it's not new, just because it's not exclusive, doesn't make it any less impactful. Any less impactful. And I feel like we as a people need to be more aware of how depression shows up within us and the people that we care about, because it's going to negatively affect us as we continue to move through life if we don't do something about it that is actionable. And what that looks like is having conversations, conversing about it, being able to go to your brother, your sister, your mother, your grandpa, your father, your partner, and have a conversation. Hey, I don't feel safe in my body right now. I don't feel too happy right now. I feel like I can't manage my daily tasks right now, and it not be something that is invalidated. You can't invalidate that type of experience. You're just complaining for no reason. Get out of here. You don't need to talk about it anymore. How is that helpful? Even if that is the case, like someone's complaining way too much, let them. What harm is it going to do? And this is something that I said a long time ago. I have conversations like this all of the time. And I'm going to continue to have conversations like this. And you might be asking, well, why? Because it keeps me here. It keeps me here. It keeps me alive. If I don't have conversations like this often, then it's going to start to ruminate in my head. I will start to make a mountain out of a molehill. So me being able to get it out of my head and put it out into the world to get some form of different perspective helps me understand that it's not really that bad. It's not really that bad. But that doesn't mean that the experience is invalid. It just means that you're not alone. Depression is fed by loneliness. Depression is fed, and this is the thing, like we as a people are communal animals. We thrive in community. We thrive in closeness. If you look back into our earliest days as a species, there was no solitude. There was no one man going through life and being able to live long. That's not how that worked, because we have biological things that keep us from being able to survive by ourselves, just like any other animal. Most animals are communal for some period of time within their life. There are very few things that exist within like our world that can just operate, and we're sentient, right? So we have to have, that's a part of our connection. Our closeness is centered around community, closeness, the idea I don't need anybody. That hyper individualized, that hyper independence is deadly, is damaging to your overall life experience. It really is. And one of the biggest things that I've learned as of recent is you don't really understand how much work you need to do within loving yourself until someone else loves you when you hate yourself the most. Let me cook. You really don't understand how much internal work you need to do with loving yourself until you are around someone in your worst of days, in your worst of moments, where you feel like you are literal toilet water, and they love you anyway. And they express it, not just they say it, not just they say that they love you, but they show you that they love you while you hate yourself more than you ever have, more than you usually do. That is a completely different experience. You might think that you've done a ton of work, and this is what I mean with the hyper independence. You might think that you've done a lot of work on yourself as an individual until you feel like absolute boo-boo, right? And someone loves you through it. Then you realize the type of love that they just gave you is the same love that you can give yourself. You just haven't learned how. You just haven't learned how. That's what I mean when depression cannot live as adequately when you are in community. And I know it's difficult, especially within the Black community, because society tells us that depression is a weakness. The society tells us that depression is shameful. Society tells us that depression is a white people problem. Society tells us that we don't have the ability to manage through depression because we should have already figured it out. Society tells us that depression is a part of our experience. That's just a part of being Black. It might not be directly said, but that's the way the society builds it. You're sad, you're oppressed, you're in poverty, you don't have good health care, you don't have all these different things. These are all things that if we had them, depression would be lessened. But since the system is built for us to not have these things, it's intrinsic to think that depression is just a part of the experience. Let me cook. I need y'all to understand. Depression is not something that needs to be clouded. It's not something that needs to always be met with an uncomfortable gaze. It's not something that needs to be met with, you need to go check yourself into a hospital. Now, sometimes, because I've been there, your depression can get bad enough to where you don't know how to work yourself out of it. You're deep into a hole and you can't get out without help. back to the point of community, because those psychiatric hospitals and those therapists and sometimes those psychiatrists and those professionals are also a part of community. It's not just your friends, not just your boyfriend, girlfriend. It's not just any of those things, right? It's not just any of those things. It is all of the resources that exist within community that are there to support you. And if you use them, depression cannot live as adequately. Back to the point of depression being something that can happen on a biological level. There are chemicals within your brain: oxytocin, serotonin, cortisol, dopamine, all of these different, and then also your progesterone, your estrogen, your testosterone, all of these different chemicals playing a part within the way that you show up with your mood, with your emotions. You can be predisposed to experience depression without having any trauma. You cannot have a traumatic experience within your life at all and still experience depression because of a chemical makeup in your brain. Which goes back to the understanding of we need to stop demonizing and mystifying depression within the experience of what it is. Because some people can't help it. It's not something that you can will yourself out of. It's not something that you can just wake up and listen. And this is also for the evangelists. This is also for the people that are devout followers of any faith. You praying about it is not going to help. It's a part of the fix, but you still have work to do. That'd be like I'm sitting in this room and I pray that I get a new job, but I haven't put in any applications. How can you expect to get your prayers met, your blessings met, without doing the part of the work that's yours? You have to do something. And I know that this is a really tough topic for us to dive into, but now we have to talk about trauma. We have to talk about traumatic experiences. We have to talk about how trauma shows up in the game of depression. How does trauma affect the way that we show up as a society, as individuals as well? And while trauma is not fair, it's not something that we choose, it's not something that should have ever happened, regardless of what the traumatic experience is, at a point of past the trauma is your responsibility to do something to heal it. And this is coming from me, someone who has experienced trauma and has likely caused trauma. That's just the fact of the matter. Does it make it okay? No. Does it make it fair? No. But is it your responsibility to do something about it so that it doesn't show up in your future for the people that you care about, the people that you're going to love, the people, your future self? We could just say, forget everybody else. Do you deserve it? Do you deserve to continue to walk through life suffering from something that happened to you a year, 2, 3, 5, 10, 50 years ago? No. Why would you deserve that? Why? So you have to talk about it. It's the only way to get past any of this. You can't just sit in a room and hope that it never happens again, because that's not the way that life works. We have to talk about it. Whether you're talking to your wife, your husband, your best friend, a therapist, a life coach, whoever, I would suggest that you have someone that is a third party outside that doesn't have any emotional ties to help you work through some things, but having people to be able to air things out to is also important. But I think that we have to normalize talking about depression. We have to normalize depression being something that exists. Because it's common. It exists on a large scale within community, not just with Black people, but with everybody. With everybody. But within the Black community, it's something that is an expectation. The things that are centered around depression, negative mood, are an expectation within the Black community because that's what we came from. That's what we came from. As far back as you can think, nobody, Black American, right, can wake up and say, I expected to have a good day. Tell me when. Tell me when in history that the first thing our ancestors expected was to wake up and have a good day. No, they woke up and expected to get hurt. They woke up and expected to get abused, oppressed, talked down to, talked crazy to. That was the expectation. So then we have to start from there. We have to start from there by working through trauma. We have to work through trauma, right? That wasn't given to us, that was given to us. We have to work through trauma that was given to us that we didn't experience so that we can start off with the expectation of having a good day. We haven't even gotten there yet. We haven't gotten to the point where we can wake up and have an expectation of having a good day consistently. We wake up and have an expectation, hopefully nothing bad happens today. That's the expectation. The expectation is hopefully nothing bad happens. Hopefully we do good. Hopefully things go well, right? But that just means that we have work to do. Now, within this episode, and there will be plenty of more episodes because depression is a huge overarching idea. It's a huge overarching experience. But I think that it's extremely important that we understand that depression is an illness. Depression is something that happens to you, not because of you, right? And help is out there. I know that it is increasingly difficult to find a therapist, but I would suggest platforms like BetterHelp that can help you find someone that you can talk to. Again, the 988 hotline. Reach out to those resources to help you find someone to talk to on a consistent basis. And if you need help, ask. And the last key takeaway is you are not by yourself. Depression is not something that only you experience. I guarantee you that if you talk to 5 people, you will find at least one that experiences depression. Maybe not the same as you, but they do to some capacity. So there is a way to be able to talk through these things. There is a direction, there is light at the edge of the tunnel, but the start of going through that tunnel is being comfortable with having conversations centered around how we feel. You don't necessarily have to start off with understanding why. You just have to be willing to talk about, I feel sad. I feel depressed. I feel like I miss them. I feel like I don't want to get out of bed today. I feel like it's going to be really hard for me to eat because I'm feeling so many emotions, and it's really difficult for that to be something that I can do when I feel these type of emotions. So I need you all to use the resources that you have and to start with just having a conversation. I would recommend you download this app. It's called How We Feel, and add some friends in there. So if it's difficult for you to talk about the way that you feel, this app allows for you to just put the emotion in there, send it to them, and give them the opportunity to respond. And it also allows for other people to tell you how they feel in a space that is comfortable, in a space that is easy. It gives you so many different emotions on 4 different spectrums of emotion. Perfect app. But at the end of the day, it's important that we have these conversations because we have to normalize having them. We are already biologically at a disadvantage in regards to being comfortable and having an understanding of what depression is and why it is and how we can get better. But it starts with having a conversation. So that's the end of this episode. I really appreciate y'all tuning in. Make sure that y'all leave a comment, like the episode, leave suggestions on things that you want to have conversations about. And I would also invite you to reach out to someone that you care about and just ask them, how are you doing today? And don't take I'm fine as an answer. Really, really ask, how are you doing today? I want the full story. But y'all have a good rest of y'all day. Be easy. Remember to stay beautiful. And I appreciate y'all listening to the podcast. Peace.